And we're continuing with the seventh chapter of Mary Poppins Opens the Door by P.L. Travers, which is called Happily Ever After. There is a party in the park for the crack between the first and final stroke of midnight on New Year's Eve. All the storybook characters are there, and some from Robinson Crusoe, very racist interpretation of Friday. I mean, that's how he was in the book, I assume. I've never read it. But right now, the lion is giving the unicorn his crown. "It's your turn to wear it," the lion said courteously, and the two exchanged a tender embrace and danced off into the crowd. "Children behaving nicely tonight?" they heard the unicorn inquire of a withered old woman who was dancing past. She was pulling along an enormous shoe full of laughing boys and girls. "Oh, so nicely," cried the old woman gaily. I haven't used my whip once. Georgie Porgy is such a help with the girls. They insist on being kissed tonight. And as for the boys, they're just sugar and spice. Look at Red Riding Hood hugging that wolf. She's trying to teach him to beg for supper. Sit down, please, Muffet, and hold on tight." The old woman waved at her fair little girl, who sat at the back of the shoe. She was deep in conversation with a large black spider, and as the shoe went rumbling past, she reached out her hand and patted him gently. "She's not even running away," cried Michael. "Why isn't she frightened?" he wanted to know. "Because of the crack," said Alfred again, as he hurried them before him. Jane and Michael couldn't help staring at Red Riding Hood and Miss Muffet. Fancy not being afraid of the wolf and that black enormous spider. Then a flimsy whiteness brushed them lightly, and they turned to find a shining shape yawning behind its hand. "Still sleepy, Beauty?" comforted Alfred as he slipped his trunk round her waist. She patted the trunk and leaned against him. "I was deep in a dream," she muttered softly, "but the first stroke luckily woke me up." As she said that, Michael's curiosity could contain itself no longer. "But I don't understand," he burst out loudly. "Everything's upside down tonight. Why doesn't the spider frighten Miss Muffet and the lion beat the unicorn?" "Alfred has told you," said Sleeping Beauty, "because we are all in the crack." "What crack?" demanded Michael. "The crack between the old year and the new. The old year dies on the first stroke of midnight, and the new year is born on the last stroke. And in between, while the other 10 strokes are sounding, there lies the secret crack." "Yes," Jane said breathlessly, for she wanted to know more. The Sleeping Beauty gave a charming yawn and smiled upon the children. "Ah. And inside the crack all things are as one. The eternal opposites meet and kiss. The wolf and the lamb lie down together. The dove and the serpent share one nest. The stars bend down and touch the earth, and the young and the old forgive each other. Night and day meet here. So do the poles. The east leans toward the west, and the circle is complete. This is the time and place, my darlings, the only time, the only place, where everybody lives happily ever after. Look!" The Sleeping Beauty waved her hand. Jane and Michael, glancing past it, saw 3 bears hopping clumsily round a little bright-haired girl. "Goldilocks!" explained the Sleeping Beauty. "As safe and sound as you are. Oh, good evening, Punch. How's the baby, Judy?" She waved to a pair of long-nosed puppets who were strolling arm in arm. "They're a loving couple tonight, you see, because they're inside the crack. Oh, look!" This time she pointed at a towering figure. His great feet stamped upon the lawn, and his head was as high as the tallest tree. A huge club was balanced on one shoulder, and perched on the other sat a laughing boy who was tweaking the big man's ear. "That's Jack the Giant Killer with his giant. The two are bosom friends tonight." The Sleeping Beauty glanced up, smiling. "And here at last come the witches." There was a roar above the children's heads as a group of beady-eyed old women swooped down through the air on broomsticks. A cry of welcome rose to greet them as they plunged into the crowd. Everyone rushed to shake their hands, and the old women cackled with witch-like laughter. "Nobody's frightened of them tonight. They're happily ever after." Sleeping Beauty's drowsy voice was like a lullaby as she stretched her arms about the children, and the 3 stood watching the thronging figures. A hare and a tortoise danced together. The Queen and the Knave of Hearts embraced, and Beauty gave her hand to the beast. The lawns bent under the tripping feet, and the air was dizzy with nodding heads as kings and princesses, heroes and witches saluted each other in the crack between the years. "Gangway, gangway, let me pass!" cried a high, clear voice. And far away at the end of the lawn they saw the golden pig. He plunged through the crowd on his stiff hind legs, dividing it to left and right with a wave of his golden trotter. Make way, he shouted importantly, and the crowd parted and drew aside, so that it formed a double row of bowing, curtsying creatures. For now there appeared at the heels of the pig a figure that was curiously familiar, a hat with a bow upon its head, and its coat shone brightly with silver buttons. Its eyes were as blue as willow patterns, and its nose turned up in an airy way like the nose of a Dutch doll. Lightly she tripped along the path with the golden pig prancing neatly before her, and as she came, a cry of greeting rose up from every throat. Hats and caps and crowns and coronets were tossed into the air, and the moon itself seemed to shine more brightly as she walked beneath its rays. "But why is she here?" demanded Jane as she watched the shape come down the clearing. "Mary Poppins is not a fairy tale." "She's even better," said Alfred loyally. "She's a fairy tale come true. Besides," he rumbled, "she's the guest of the evening. It was she who left the books open." Amid the happy shouts of welcome, Mary Poppins bowed to right and left. Then she marched to the center of the lawn, and opening her black handbag, she took out a concertina. "Choose your partners!" cried the golden pig as he drew a flute from a pocket in his skin and put it to his mouth. At that command, every creature there turned swiftly to his neighbor. Then the flute broke into a swinging tune. The concertina and the 24 blackbirds took up the gay refrain, and a white cat played the chorus sweetly on a hey diddle fiddle. "Can it be my cat?" Michael wondered as he looked for the pattern of flowers and leaves. He had no time to decide, however, for his attention was attracted by Alfred. The gray flannel elephant lumbered past, uttering happy jungle cries, and using his trunk as a trumpet. "May I have the pleasure, my dear young lady?" He bowed to the sleeping beauty. She gave him her hand, and they danced away, Alfred taking care not to tread on her toes, and the sleeping beauty yawning daintily and looking very dreamy. Everyone seemed to be choosing a partner or finding a friend in the throng. Kiss me! Cried a group of girls as they twined their arms around a large fat schoolboy. "Out of my way, young Georgie Porgy!" cried the farmer's wife, dancing with 3 blind mice. And the fat boy plunged off into the crowd with the girls all laughing about him. 1, 2, and hop and turn, that's the way it goes. Red Riding Hood, holding the wolf by the paw, was teaching him how to dance. The wolf, looking very humble and shy, was watching his feet as she counted. Jane and Michael could hardly believe their eyes. But before they had time to think about it, a friendly voice hailed them. "Do you dance?" said Robinson Crusoe gaily, as he took Jane's hand and whirled her away. She swung around, pressed to his goatskin coat, as Michael pranced off in the arms of Man Friday. "Who is that?" asked Jane as they danced along, for there was the blue duck waddling past, clasped in the bosom of a large grey bird. "That's Goosey Gander," said Robinson Crusoe, "and there's Pinny with Cinderella." She glanced round quickly, and there, sure enough, was the old rag Pinny, looking very important and proud of himself as he danced with a beautiful lady. Everybody had a partner. No one was lonely or left out. All the fairy tales ever told were gathered together on that square of grass, embracing each other with joy. "Are you happy, Jane?" Michael called to her as he and Friday went galloping past. "Forever and ever," she answered, smiling, and for that moment knew it was true. The music was sweeter now and wilder. It tossed among the tossing trees. It echoed above the strokes of the clock. Mary Poppins, the pig, and the fiddling cat were bending and swaying as they played. Again and again the blackbirds sang and never seemed to grow weary. The fairy tale figures swung about the children, and in their ears the fairy tale voices were sweetly singing and laughing. "Happily ever after!" came the echoing cry from everyone in the park. "What was that?" cried Jane to her partner, for behind the shouting and the music she heard the boom of a clock. Time's nearly up, said Robinson Crusoe. That must have been the 6th stroke. They paused for a moment in their dance to listen to the clock. 7. Above the sound rose the fairy tale music, rocking them all in its golden net. 8, said the steady, distant boom, and the dancing feet seemed to move more swiftly. 9, the trees themselves were dancing now, bending their boughs to the fairy tune. 10, O lion and unicorn, wolf and lamb, friend and enemy, dark and light. 11, O fleeting moment, O time on the wing, how short is the space between the years. Let us be happy, happy ever after. 12, solemn and deep, the last stroke struck. 12, the cry went up from every throat, and the ring immediately broke and scattered. Bright shapes brushed swiftly past the children. Jack and his giant, Punch and Judy. Away sped the spider with Miss Muffet and Humpty Dumpty on his spindly legs. The lion and the unicorn, Goldilocks, Red Riding Hood, and 3 blind mice. They streamed away across the grass and seemed to melt in the moonshine. Cinderella and the witches vanished. The Sleeping Beauty and the cat with the fiddle fled and were lost in light. And Jane and Michael, looking round for their partners, found that Robinson Crusoe and his man Friday had dissolved into the air. The fairy tale music died away. It was lost in the lordly peal of bells. For now, from every tower and steeple, the chimes rang out triumphantly. Big Ben, St. Paul's, St. Bride's, Old Bailey, Southwark, St. Martin's, Westminster, Bow. But one bell sounded above the others, merry and clear and insistent. Ting-a-ling, ting-a-ling, ting-a-ling. It was different somehow from the New Year's bells, familiar and friendly, and nearer home. Ting-a-ling-a-ling, it cried, and mixed with its echoes was a well-known voice. Who wants crumpets? The voice said loudly, demanding an immediate answer. Jane and Michael opened their eyes. They sat up and stared about them. They were in their beds, under the eiderdowns, and John and Barbara were asleep beside them. The fire glowed gaily in its grate. The morning light streamed through the nursery windows. Ting-a-ling! From somewhere below, down in the lane, came the sound of a tinkling bell. I said, who wants crumpets? Didn't you hear me? The crumpet man's down in the lane. There was no mistaking it. The voice was the voice of Mary Poppins, and it sounded very impatient. I do, said Michael hurriedly. I do, echoed Jane. Mary Poppins sniffed. Then why not say so at once? She said sharply. She crossed to the window and waved her hand to summon the crumpet man. Downstairs, the front gate opened quickly with its usual noisy squawk. The crumpet man ran up the path and knocked at the back door. He was sure of an order from number 17, for all the Banks family were partial to crumpets. Mary Poppins turned away from the window and put a log on the fire. Michael gazed at her sleepily for a moment, then he rubbed his eyes, and with a start he woke up completely. I say, he shouted, I want my pig. Where is it, Mary Poppins? Yes, joined in John. I want Alfred. And where are the blue... Yes, joined in Jane. I want Alfred. And where are the blue duck and Pinny? On the top of the cupboard. Where else would they be? Said Mary Poppins crossly. They glanced up. There were the 4 toys standing in a row exactly as she had left them, and in front of them lay Robinson Crusoe, the Green Fairy Book, and Mother Goose nursery rhymes. But the books were no longer open, as they had been last night. They were piled upon one another neatly, and were all firmly closed. But how did they get back from the park? Said Michael, very surprised. And where is the pig's flute? Jane exclaimed. And your concertina? Now it was Mary Poppins' turn to stare. My what? She inquired with an ominous look. Your concertina, Mary Poppins. You played it last night in the park. Mary Poppins turned from the fire and came toward Jane, glaring. I'd like you to repeat that, please. Her voice was quiet and dreadful. Did I understand you to say, Jane Banks, that I was in the park last night playing a musical instrument, me? But you were, protested Michael bravely. We were all there. You and the toys and Jane and I. We were dancing with the fairy tales inside the crack. Mary Poppins stared at them as though her ears had betrayed her. The look on her face was simply frightful. And we will pause there.